Act 1. The bindings are hemp rope, not chain. That tells me something. Chain is for men they're afraid of. Rope is for men they've already decided don't matter. I file that information away and keep my breathing even, counting the space between each exhale, the way my first teacher taught me before he became the man who signed my erasure order. The market smells like animal dung and overripe persimmon and the particular kind of human sweat that only comes from fear. I have cataloged 4 exits. 2 are viable. One requires passing through the livestock pen to the east, which is suboptimal but workable. The other opens onto the main road, busy, visible, not ideal, but if the opportunity presents itself in the next 20 minutes before the senior lots are called. A hand shoves my shoulder from behind. I don't stumble. The man behind me expected me to stumble. I feel his confusion like a shift in air pressure. I keep my eyes forward and adjust my footing without comment. Don't stumble. Don't flinch. Don't let them measure you. That is the only armor I have left. My name, my real name, is Shinyu. 3 years ago, that name appeared in imperial dispatches ahead of generals twice my age. 3 years ago, I restructured the entire northern supply chain during an active siege and held Yenmen Pass for 11 days with 400 men in bad weather. 3 years ago, the Emperor's own war council called me the dynasty's sharpest tactical mind in a generation. Then Minister Chao decided a mind that sharp was better controlled than rewarded. I was 19 days past my 26th birthday when the charges were filed. Falsified. Every word. I knew it. The 3 officials who countersigned the order knew it. Minister Chao certainly knew it. None of that was relevant. What was relevant was that I had no family name with enough weight to push back, no patron willing to bleed political capital for a war advisor with no battlefield rank, and a mentor who had already calculated that my usefulness to him was worth precisely less than his own comfort. The trial lasted 4 hours. I have not said my own name aloud since. Here is what I know about slave markets. The men who run them are not cruel in any interesting way. They are efficient. Cruelty requires investment, attention, intention, some measure of care about the outcome. The men who process lots in places like this one outside Lingjun City feel nothing about the product moving through their hands. That is, in its own way, worse. You cannot reason with indifference. You cannot appeal to it. You simply move through it the way water moves through rock, slowly, without announcement, finding the path that already exists. I have been in this market for 6 hours. I have eaten nothing since yesterday's midday rice. My wrists itch under the rope. I keep my face empty and watch the exits. The senior lots are called just past the noon bell. I am third. The man ahead of me, older, broad through the shoulders, some kind of laborer by the callous pattern on his hands, is purchased quickly by a merchant house representative who doesn't bother examining him beyond a glance at his back and arms. Muscle and compliance. Transaction complete. Next. I step forward onto the platform. The crowd is moderate. Mostly household stewards, a few lower-ranking military adjutants shopping for clerical labor, 2 women from what looks like a wealthy physician's household. Nobody who frightens me. I scan faces the way I was trained to scan terrain, looking for the highest ground, the concealed position, the variable that doesn't fit the pattern. I find him immediately. He is standing at the back of the crowd and he should not be here. Not here, not in this city, not at this market, not standing in a civilian crowd without a full military escort surrounding him like weather. Men at his rank do not browse slave markets in Lingjun personally. They send stewards. They send adjutants. They certainly do not stand in the back of a crowd with their arms folded and their expression arranged into something that is not quite boredom and not quite attention but something precise and cold in the space between. I know his face from dispatches. General Wei Zhan. Commander of the Empire's Western Army. Victor of the Battle of Iron Ridge. The man who held the Wulong River crossing for 30 days against a force 3 times his size using terrain manipulation and supply denial, a strategy that, if I am being honest with myself, I would have executed almost identically, though I would have collapsed the Eastern Bank a day earlier. He is looking at the platform. He is looking at me. I do not look away. This is the moment most men break. I have watched it happen, the involuntary drop of the gaze, the slight forward curl of the shoulders, the body's animal decision to make itself smaller in the presence of something larger. It is not weakness. It is sense. Every instinct a person carries tells them to yield to what can destroy them. My instincts have been saying that for 3 years and I have been ignoring them methodically. I keep my eyes on Wei Zhan. He keeps his eyes on me. The market auctioneer is saying something about clerical capability and physical condition. I'm not listening. I am watching Wei Zhan's face for the thing that will tell me what kind of man he is, The small shift that reveals whether this is curiosity or appetite, or the particular cold interest of someone who has found a tool he wants to own. What I see is none of those things. What I see is someone who has just noticed something that doesn't fit his pattern. He unfolds his arms. He doesn't negotiate. That is the detail that stays with me through the processing, the documentation, the cutting of the hemp rope and the replacement with a cloth band that means purchased, transit only, the walk through the market's back corridor past the livestock pen, exit 2, I note, still viable, and out into the sharp afternoon light of the main road. He paid the asking price without comment. I have spent 3 years learning how powerful men move through the world, and I can tell you with certainty. Men who don't negotiate are either careless with money or certain they are not overpaying. Wei Zhan does not look like a man who is careless with anything. A junior officer materializes at his side, young, efficient, nervous in the specific way that people are nervous around someone they genuinely respect rather than merely fear. He falls into step without being directed. Wei Zhan says something low to him that I don't catch, and the officer moves ahead to manage the horses. Wei Zhan walks beside me. Not behind. Not ahead. Beside. I catalog this and say nothing. We ride for 2 hours north of the city. The compound is military, not ostentatious, not decorated, built entirely around function. Walls that mean something. Sight lines that were chosen deliberately. The stables are positioned to allow fast exits on 3 sides. I am noting all of this because it is what I do and because it is the only thing currently preventing me from thinking about the fact that I am entering a general's private compound as purchased labor and I do not yet know what he wants from me. The steward who receives me is a woman of about 50 with an expression like compressed stone. She reviews my documentation, asks me 3 questions about literacy and physical condition, listens to my answers with the focus of someone calibrating something. Then she assigns me to the war room. Cleaning. I follow her through the compound's eastern corridor and I keep my face empty and I do not react to this assignment in any visible way. I am a man who no longer has reactions that other people can see. I refined that capability over 3 years of having nothing left to lose, and it is, at this point, essentially structural. But internally, the war room. The war room is empty when I arrive. Campaign maps cover 3 of the 4 walls. The central table holds the current operational layout. I can see at a glance that it's a southern campaign, mid-stage, river crossing as the primary tactical problem. I am handed a cloth and directed to dust the shelving along the north wall. I dust the shelving along the north wall. I do not look at the maps for the first 20 minutes. When the steward leaves, I allow myself to look. The southern formation is wrong. Not catastrophically, not in a way that guarantees defeat, not in a way that a competent officer wouldn't eventually catch. But the river approach assumes consistent water depth across the crossing point in a seasonal window where the eastern bank silts heavily, which will slow the left flank by approximately 40 minutes and create an exposure gap that an alert enemy commander will exploit before the center can compensate. I look at it for a long time. I fold the map. I place it back exactly as it was. I finish dusting the north wall and I leave the war room and I find the quarters I've been assigned. A small room off the servants' corridor, clean, adequate, and I sit on the edge of the sleeping mat in the dark and I breathe. Don't announce yourself, I think. Not yet. Not until you know what this is. Outside, somewhere in the compound, I can hear Wei Zhan's voice giving orders to someone. Low, unhurried, precise. The voice of a man who has never had to raise it to be obeyed. I lie down. I do not sleep for a long time. He doesn't know what he brought home. I intend to keep it that way. 2. 3 things happen in my first week at Wei Zhan's compound that I file away and do not react to. The first, I am never assigned to the kitchens, the stables, or the outer yard. Every task I receive places me inside the operational buildings. The war room, the dispatch corridor, the document archive. A steward manages household assignments. Stewards do not make those decisions arbitrarily. Someone specified where I should be. The second, the war room maps are reorganized twice in 4 days. Not cleaned. Reorganized, the operational layout shifted, new documents layered in, the southern campaign materials moved from the central table to the left wall where the light from the eastern window hits them differently in the afternoon. Better reading angle. Someone is working in here at night after I leave. The third, I am never watched directly. Only indirectly. I notice it the way you notice a change in wind direction. Not because you see the wind but because something that was still is no longer still. A junior officer who has no clerical reason to be in the archive corridor appears there twice while I am working. The steward checks my progress in the war room at intervals slightly too regular to be routine. Once, I look up from the shelving and the doorway is empty, but there is a quality to the emptiness that means it was not empty a moment ago. I dust the shelves. I replace the documents in their correct positions. I do not look at the maps for longer than a man doing his job would need to. On the 8th day they test me directly. I know it is a test before it begins. The tell is the junior officer, Lieutenant Fong, 23, competent but not exceptional, loyal in the straightforward way that young officers are loyal when they genuinely believe in the man they serve. He arrives in the war room mid-morning while I am there with my cloth and my carefully maintained expression of mild, serviceable blankness. He unrolls the Southern campaign map on the central table. He has documents under his arm. He begins reviewing them with the focused performance of a man who is not performing. I move to the far shelving and dust things that don't need dusting. Lieutenant Fong spends 20 minutes with the map. He marks 3 positions with small ink flags. 2 of them are correct. One of them is on the eastern bank crossing point, the silted approach, the 40-minute exposure window, the gap that will open in the left flank before the center compensates. He flags it as viable. I watch the flag go down. I keep my face empty. I move to the next shelf. The room empties at midday. I eat with the other household staff in the eastern courtyard. Rice, pickled vegetables, a thin soup that is better than what I ate in the processing facility and considerably worse than what I ate as an imperial advisor, which is an observation I make without any particular feeling attached to it. Feeling things about the distance between what I was and what I am now is a luxury I retired 3 years ago. The woman who sits across from me is called May. She manages the compound's textile work and has been here 11 years and knows everything that happens within these walls with the quiet, comprehensive awareness that long-serving household staff always develop. She does not ask me questions. She offers me more soup without being asked. I accept it and we eat in silence that is, somehow, not unfriendly. I am back in the war room by the first afternoon bell. The flags Lieutenant Fong placed are still on the map. All 3 of them. I look at the Eastern Bank flag for a long time. I pick up my cloth. I move to the north shelving. I last 4 more days. This is longer than I expected. I have a precise and at this point well-documented relationship with my own limits, and I had estimated 3 days before the professional instinct overrode the survival instinct. 4 days represents genuine discipline, and I allow myself a moment of acknowledgement before I do what I am about to do. It is late afternoon. The war room is empty. The light from the eastern window falls across the campaign table at the angle I have been watching for 11 days, long, amber, clarifying. The kind of light that makes errors visible. I set my cloth down. I cross to the campaign table. I look at the map properly for the first time. Not the careful peripheral surveillance of a man doing his job. Actually look, the way I used to look at terrain reports in the Northern War Room with the Emperor's campaign seal on the table and generals twice my age waiting for my assessment. The Eastern Bank problem is worse than I initially read it. The silting is seasonal, but the troop weight they're planning to move across that crossing will accelerate the depth loss by approximately a day and a half. It's not 40 minutes of exposure. It's closer to 2 hours. With the left flank delayed 2 hours, the center will need to hold unsupported against whatever the enemy's river defense deploys, and the enemy's river defense. I cross to the intelligence documents on the left wall. Yes. Cavalry. Fast cavalry with fire capability. The center will not hold 2 hours unsupported against fire cavalry. This campaign will fail at the river. I stand at the table and I do not touch the map, and I look at the problem the way I used to look at problems when my job was solving them and my name meant something and the dynasty's borders were, in some real and measurable way, partially my responsibility. Then I hear the door. I do not move. This is a calculated decision made in approximately half a second. Moving looks like guilt, and guilt looks like concealment, and concealment confirms that I have been performing ignorance, which is the more dangerous exposure. I stay at the table. I keep my eyes on the map. I let him find me here. Wei Zhan's footsteps are quieter than they should be for a man his size. I smell him before I hear him clearly, cedarwood and iron, and underneath that something colder, mineral, like stone after rain. I catalogued this the first day, and I have been careful not to think about it since, because it is not information I need and I do not spend energy on information I don't need. He stops at the edge of the table. I look up. Up close, in the specific quality of late afternoon light, Wei Zhan is, I search for the word that is accurate without being anything else and settle on, exact. He is exactly as large as the space he occupies, exactly as still as the situation requires, exactly as focused as the thing in front of him demands. There is no excess in him. No performance. Most powerful men perform their power continuously, the way a fire performs heat. Wei Zhan simply is what he is, and what he is fills the room without effort. He looks at me. He looks at the map. He looks at me again. You saw it. Not a question. Not an accusation. A statement of fact delivered in the flattest possible register. The voice of a man closing a gap between what he suspected and what he now knows. I hold his gaze. I say nothing. The silence runs for several seconds. In my experience, most people cannot tolerate silence of this quality, the kind with a specific weight to it, the kind that asks something. They fill it. They explain themselves, they deflect, they reassert their position through volume or elaboration. I have ended negotiations simply by waiting. Wei Zhan does not fill the silence. He waits too. We look at each other across the campaign table in the amber afternoon light, and neither of us speaks, and the map between us has a flag on the eastern bank crossing point that will get men killed if no one moves it, and I am not going to be the first one to say so, and he is not going to pretend he doesn't already know I know. After a long moment he says, "Be here at dawn." He leaves. I stand at the table until his footsteps have faded completely down the corridor. Then I pick up my cloth. I fold it. I place it on the north shelving in its correct position. I leave the war room. I do not look at the map again. That night I find food outside my door. Not the household staff meal, that was hours ago. This is something separate. A covered bowl of congee with preserved egg and ginger, still warm, and beside it a small dish of salted fish that did not come from the communal kitchen because I have eaten from the communal kitchen for 11 days and it does not produce salted fish of this quality. I stand in the doorway and look at it for a moment. I look down the corridor in both directions. Empty. No sound of retreating footsteps. Whoever left this was either very fast or very practiced at not being heard, and I have a strong hypothesis about which. I bring the food inside. I sit on the sleeping mat and I eat it slowly in the dark, and I think about a general who does not negotiate prices and does not fill silences and does not send stewards to do things he apparently prefers to do himself, and I think about a campaign map with a flag on the wrong crossing point and what it means that he brought me to that room and waited. He already knows. I set the empty bowl down. The question is what he intends to do about it. I lie back on the mat and stare at the ceiling and I listen to the compound settle into night. The distant change of the watch, the horses in the stables, the wind off the northern hills moving through the courtyard trees. Outside somewhere, silence. Wei Zhan's quarters are on the western side of the compound. I worked this out on day 2. From where I lie there is no way to know if a lamp is still burning there. I do not try to determine this. I close my eyes. Dawn, I think. He said dawn. 3. Dawn comes in gray and cold off the northern hills. I'm already in the war room when Wei Zhan arrives. This is intentional. I want to know how he responds to finding me here before he expects me, whether it reads as eagerness, which would shift the power balance in a direction I cannot afford, or whether it reads as something else. I need to see his face in the first unguarded half-second before he composes it. He opens the door and finds me at the north shelving with my cloth. His face does not change. But he pauses. One beat, barely measurable, the length of a single breath, and in that pause I read something that is not surprise and not approval and is closest, I think, to the specific recognition of a man who set a trap and found exactly what he expected inside it, and is now deciding what that means. He crosses to the campaign table without speaking. He unrolls the southern map. He stands back and looks at it the way I looked at it yesterday, actually looks, without performance, the full attention of a military mind engaging a genuine problem. Then he steps aside and does not look at me and says, "Tell me what you see." I set the cloth down. I cross to the table. I look at the map and I feel something shift in my chest. Small, structural, like a door opening in a room I sealed 3 years ago and told myself I would not re-enter. The feeling of a mind doing what it was built to do. I have missed it the way you miss a language you grew up speaking. The absence of it has been a specific and daily loss that I do not think about. I think about it now for exactly 1 second. Then I begin. I do not soften it. I do not frame it as suggestion or possibility or the humble observation of a household servant who happened to notice something. I speak the way I used to speak in the Imperial War Council, direct, sequenced, without apology for the conclusions. The eastern bank crossing point. The seasonal silting. The troop weight calculation and the accelerated depth loss. The 2-hour exposure window on the left flank. The enemy's fire cavalry capability as documented in the intelligence reports on the left wall. The probability of center collapse before reinforcement arrives. I walk him through all of it. Wei Zhan listens. He does not interrupt. He does not push back. He watches the map while I speak and occasionally his gaze moves to check a reference document and then returns, and I get the impression he is not checking because he doubts me but because he is building the same structure I am building, independently, in real time, and verifying that our conclusions align. When I finish, the room is quiet. He looks at the Eastern Bank flag Lieutenant Fong placed 9 days ago. He reaches out and removes it. He sets it on the table beside the map. He looks at it for a moment, this small ink flag that would have sent men into a 2-hour kill box, and his expression does something brief and controlled that I am not meant to see and would not describe even to myself. Then he looks at me. The approach through the western tributary, he says. Depth. Consistent through the season. Narrower crossing front, you'll need to extend the transit time by approximately 3 hours. But the left flank arrives intact. He nods once. Go, he says. I pick up my cloth. I return to the north shelving. We do not discuss what just happened. We will not discuss what just happened. I understand this implicitly and I find, to my own mild surprise, that I prefer it this way. This becomes the structure of our mornings. Not every morning, that would be pattern, and pattern is visible, and visible is dangerous in ways that neither of us has named but both of us are navigating. Every third day. Sometimes every fourth. Wei Zhan arrives, unrolls whatever is current, steps back. I set down whatever I am holding. I cross to the table. We speak about the campaign. Only the campaign. He asks questions that are not quite questions, statements with gaps in them that he leaves for me to fill, which is a style of collaborative thinking I recognize from the Imperial War Council and did not expect to find in a military compound outside Lingjun in the company of a general who purchased me at a slave market for the asking price without negotiating. I fill the gaps. He builds on what I give him. Between sessions I do my assigned work. I dust the shelves. I organize the archive. I carry documents between the war room and the dispatch corridor and I perform, with consistent precision, the complete unremarkability of a literate household servant of no particular significance. The supply lines are the first thing I fix without being asked. It happens on a Tuesday in the third week, during a routine document pass between the archive and the dispatch officer's table. I am carrying a stack of requisition orders, grain, equipment, medical supply, and I read them while I walk because I read everything I carry and I always have. It is structural at this point, I cannot not do it. The grain routing from the southern depot is running through Changwei Pass. Changwei Pass is currently under early seasonal snow. Not impassable, not yet. But the transit time will have increased by approximately 4 days over the standard estimate, which means the forward units are going to run short before the next requisition cycle closes, which means there will be a supply gap of approximately 6 days in the third week of the campaign's active phase, which is precisely when the river crossing is scheduled. I think about this for the length of the corridor. I reach the dispatch officer's table. Lieutenant Fong is there, reviewing a different set of orders. Young, efficient, not exceptional. Lieutenant, I say, setting the stack down, the Changwei routing, has anyone flagged the seasonal transit adjustment? He looks up. What adjustment? I arrange my face into the expression of someone who has perhaps overheard something and is uncertain whether it is his place to mention it. Confusion adjacent to helpfulness. I have been practicing this expression for 3 weeks and it is now essentially flawless. I may have misunderstood, I say. I thought I heard the steward mention something about the past conditions. Probably nothing. I leave the stack and return to the archive. The requisition routing is changed by end of day. Fong reroutes it through the Wuling Road, 2 days longer in transit but clear of seasonal obstruction, which resolves the supply gap entirely. He presents it to Wei Zhan at the evening briefing as his own observation. I'm not in the room. I do not need to be in the room. That night there is no food outside my door. There is, instead, a better sleeping mat. It is simply there when I return to my quarters, the old one replaced, the new one already laid out, thicker, properly padded, the kind issued to junior officers rather than household staff. No note. No explanation. No indication of who carried it or when. I stand in the doorway. I look at the mat. One small gesture, I think. Then nothing. I go inside. An ambush is prevented on a Thursday. This one requires more care. The intelligence report is real, a legitimate military document that crosses my hands during an archive filing task. Enemy scout movement in the Beishan corridor, logged 3 days ago, assessed as reconnaissance. The assessment is wrong. The movement pattern isn't reconnaissance. It's positioning, specifically the kind of lateral repositioning that precedes an interdiction ambush on a supply or messenger route. I know this because I spent 8 months studying enemy tactical patterns in the Northern Campaign and the signature is unmistakable once you've seen it enough times. I cannot flag this as a misunderstanding I overheard. I think about it for most of the morning. At midday I am returning documents to the war room. Wei Zhan is not there. I file everything in its correct location. Before I leave, I take the Beishan intelligence report from the archive stack, where it is categorized under Resolved, Reconnaissance, and I refile it. Under Pending, Movement Pattern Review. Then I leave. Wei Zhan pulls it that afternoon. I know because I am in the dispatch corridor when the runner goes for Lieutenant Fang, and I know by the speed of Fang's walk when he passes me that something has shifted in the operational picture. By evening, the messenger route through the Beishan corridor is suspended pending scout verification. 2 days later, the scouts confirm the interdiction positioning. The route stays closed. The messengers who would have ridden through it do not ride through it. I file this away and say nothing and return to the north shelving. By the end of the first month, I have become indispensable in the way that water becomes indispensable. Not through announcement, not through demand, but through the simple structural fact that the system now relies on flows that did not exist before I arrived and would fail without them, and no one has quite traced those flows back to their source. Wei Zhan has. I know he has because the morning sessions shift. He stops unrolling the maps and stepping back and waiting. He begins asking me directly, still framed as questions rather than consultation, still with the formal distance that neither of us has moved to close, but direct. He asks me about the Eastern River intelligence before Fang briefs him on it. He asks me what I would do with the cavalry unit currently stationed at the rear flank that is, as we both know, being wasted at the rear flank. He asks me once, quietly, without preamble, what I know about Minister Chao's approach to resource allocation during an active campaign. I go very still when he says that name. I don't know the minister, I say. Wei Zhan looks at me for a long moment. No, he says. Of course not. He looks back at the map. Neither of us speaks for several seconds. The cavalry, he says. You were saying. I move the cavalry in my mind the way I used to move pieces on the imperial war table. Cleanly, without sentiment, the pure geometry of force and terrain and timing. I tell him what I would do. He listens. He asks 2 questions. I answer them. He nods once and the session ends and I return to the shelving, and that evening at the briefing I hear, through the corridor wall, Wei Zhan giving the cavalry redeployment order in the flat, unhurried voice that means the decision was made before the briefing began. This is, I realize, contentment. Not happiness. I have a precise and honest relationship with my own emotional vocabulary, and happiness is not the word. But contentment. The specific quality of a mind doing what it was built to do, in the company of someone who can use what it produces, and the specific quality of that usefulness being, for the first time in 3 years, real. I note this. I set it aside. I do not examine it further. The parallel truth is this. In the war room at midnight, I know because May confirmed it without knowing she confirmed it, in the way that long-serving household staff confirm things, Wei Zhan works alone. After the compound sleeps. After the briefings and the orders and the operational management of a Western army that comprises 40,000 men and their equipment and their supply chains and their 1,000 individual problems. He works alone in the room where I spend my days. I think about this sometimes when I cannot sleep. I think about what it costs to hold 40,000 people's safety inside a single mind, every day without rest, without the kind of counsel that actually matches the weight of the problem. I think about what it costs to be that certain, that responsible, that exact, day after day in a position where error is measured in lives. I think about the sleeping mat outside my door. The food still warm. The way he waits, in the morning sessions, long enough for me to cross to the table first. So I am standing at the map when he arrives. So the decision to engage is visibly mine. He gives me the choice, I think. Every time. He gives me the choice. I stare at the ceiling. Outside, the compound is quiet. The watch changes. The northern hills hold their cold against the dark. Don't I tell myself? That is not information you need. On the 34th day, everything changes. The letter arrives in the afternoon, sealed, no sender marking on the outer wrap, handed to Wei Zhan's steward by a courier I have never seen before and do not see again. I am in the dispatch corridor when it passes me. I notice the seal quality. The ink. The particular way the outer wrap is folded. Not military, not merchant house, not any of the standard administrative styles. Court correspondence. Private court correspondence. The kind that moves through unofficial channels. I watch it pass and I keep my face empty and I feel, for the first time in 34 days, the cold particular sensation of something I cannot refile under pending and cannot reroute through a cleaner passage and cannot fix with a question framed as confusion. Someone in the capital knows where I am. I do not know yet what they intend to do about it. That night there is nothing outside my door. I sit on the good sleeping mat in the dark and I think about exits. The livestock pen to the east, still viable probably. The main road, Too visible now that I've been here long enough to be remembered. The northern hills are a possibility if I can acquire supplies and a horse, which I cannot currently do without being noticed, which means the window for that option is narrowing with every day I remain here. I think about the campaign map and the Eastern Bank flag that Wei Zhan removed without ceremony and set on the table like a small reckoning with the cost of bad information. I think about 40,000 men. I think about the river crossing that will now succeed because the approach goes through the western tributary and the left flank will arrive intact. I think about Wei Zhan in the war room at midnight working alone. Leave, I tell myself. The compound is quiet. The northern hills hold their cold. I do not leave. Act 4. 3 more days pass before anything moves. I spend them waiting the way I have learned to wait, not passively, not with the slack patience of someone who has surrendered to circumstance, but with the active careful stillness of someone mapping the shape of what is coming before it arrives. I watch the compound's rhythms for deviation. I watch the steward's face for the particular compression around the eyes that means she is managing something she has not been told how to manage. I watch Wei Zhan. Wei Zhan gives me nothing. This is, in itself, information. He is not avoiding me. He is not altered in any visible way, same flat unhurried voice at briefings, same stillness in the war room, same single nod that closes a morning session. But the morning sessions have stopped. 3 days, no summons to the table. I arrive at dawn and I take my cloth and I work the shelving and he does not step aside from the map. He is waiting too. We are both waiting and neither of us is looking at the other and the letter is somewhere in this compound like a stone at the bottom of a river, changing nothing on the surface, changing everything underneath. The agent arrives on the 4th day. I know he is not a courier before he dismounts. Couriers have a specific relationship with their horses. Functional, transactional, the relationship of a man with a tool he depends on. This man dismounts the way soldiers dismount when they are trying not to look like soldiers. The weight distribution. The scan of the yard that is too thorough and too fast. The way his hands settle at his sides in the default resting position of someone trained to reach for something quickly. Court intelligence. Mid-rank probably. Experienced enough to be sent alone, not experienced enough to fully suppress the training. I am in the eastern courtyard when he arrives. I watch him cross toward the main entrance. He does not look at me. This is the most frightening thing that has happened in 37 days. A man arriving at a military compound to conduct legitimate business looks at the people in the courtyard, not carefully, not with focus, but with the casual environmental awareness of someone moving through an unfamiliar space. It is instinctive. It is human. He did not look at me. He knew exactly where I was and chose not to confirm it with his eyes. I set down what I am carrying. I pick it back up. I walk to the archive corridor at normal pace and I breathe through the cold that has moved from my chest into my hands and I think very precisely about what this means. He was told where I would be. He was told what I look like. He came here knowing both of those things, which means the letter that arrived 4 days ago was not a warning shot. It was a negotiation opening. And this man is the second move. I think about Minister Chow. I think about the particular way powerful men remove problems, not with violence, which is loud and leaves evidence, but with offers. Offers structured so that refusal is indistinguishable from confession. Offers that arrive in private, leave no record, and place the burden of the next move entirely on the person being offered. I think about what I have that Minister Chow would want contained. The answer is, everything. 3 years of strategic knowledge developed inside the Imperial War Council. Campaign architectures. Tactical frameworks. Supply chain vulnerabilities across 3 active fronts. The specific details of 17 falsified documents that I cannot prove were falsified but that I can describe with enough precision to make the right people ask uncomfortable questions. And now, 37 days inside the operational war room of the Empire's most successful Western commander, whose campaigns are, thanks to the Western tributary crossing and the cavalry redeployment and the closed Beishan corridor, going considerably better than Minister Chow's allies in the court would prefer. I realize, significantly more dangerous than I allowed myself to understand. The meeting happens in Wei Zhan's formal receiving room. I know because Mei tells me without telling me, while we eat the midday meal in the eastern courtyard. She tells me the way she tells me everything, not directly, not with awareness that she is telling me anything at all, but through the specific texture of what she mentions and what she doesn't mention and the order in which she mentions things. A visitor. Formal receiving room, not the briefing room, so not military business. Tea served, not wine, so not a social call. The steward was asked to clear the corridor outside. 40 minutes. The visitor leaves before the afternoon bell. I watch him cross the yard to his horse. He mounts with the same controlled efficiency he dismounted with. He does not look at me on his way out either. The stone at the bottom of the river has moved. I am in the war room when Wei Zhan finds me. It is 2 hours past the visitor's departure and I have spent both hours working with the precise focused blankness of a man who is not thinking about anything except the documents in front of him, which is to say I have spent both hours thinking about nothing except this moment and how it will open and what the first 30 seconds will tell me about which direction I need to move. He closes the door. This is new. The door has never been closed during a morning session or at any other time I have been alone with him in this room. I note it and keep my hands on the shelving and keep my back to him for exactly 2 more seconds. Enough to finish the motion I was already in, not enough to look like I am composing myself. And then I turn. He is standing at the campaign table. The map is not unrolled. He is looking at me with the expression I have never seen on him before, not the flat controlled assessment of the morning sessions, not the particular quality of attention he gives problems he is solving. Something older than that. Something that has been sitting with weight on it for 4 days and has not gotten lighter. He says, Imperial Advisor Xin Yu. Architect of the Northern Campaign. Erased from Imperial Record. 3rd year of the Tianlong reign. He says it the way he says everything, flat, sequenced, without performance. Like reading coordinates off a map. Like closing the gap between what he has known and what he is now willing to name aloud. The room is very quiet. I keep my face still and I look at him and I do not confirm or deny and I do not speak because there is nothing to say that changes what he already knows and speaking now would only reveal what the silence has not yet revealed, which is how afraid I am. Not of him. Of what comes next. The letter, he says, arrived 4 days ago. I know, I say. Something moves across his face. Brief. Controlled. Gone. You knew before the letter, he says. You've been mapping exits since you arrived. This is not a question either. I am beginning to understand that very few things Wei Zhan says are questions. They are statements with space left in them, space for confirmation, for correction, for the particular kind of honesty that only emerges when someone has already demonstrated they know the shape of the truth and is simply waiting for you to stop pretending otherwise. Yes, I say. He looks at me for a long moment. Then, why didn't you use them? This is the question I have not answered for myself. I have the tactical answers. The window for the eastern exit narrowed, the main road became too visible, the northern hills require supplies I cannot acquire without exposure. These are true. They are also not the reason. The reason is 37 mornings of arriving at dawn. The reason is the western tributary crossing and the left flank arriving intact and 40,000 men who will cross a river without dying in a 2-hour kill box. The reason is the sleeping mat and the salted fish and the way he steps aside from the map and waits for me to approach it first. Every time, so the choice is visibly mine. The reason is a man working alone at midnight in a room where I spend my days and the specific weight of what it costs to hold that much responsibility inside a single mind without counsel that actually matches it. I do not say any of this. I say, the timing wasn't right. Wei Zhan looks at me steadily. No, he says after a moment. It wasn't. I do not know what he means by that. I file it and do not examine it and move on. The offer, I say. What did he send? Wei Zhan's expression does not change. But there is a quality to his stillness that shifts, a degree of tension barely perceptible in the line of his shoulders. Return to the capital. Recant the Northern Campaign records. Attribute the strategic framework to Minister Chao's advisory council. Accept reinstatement under the minister's direct patronage. I absorb this. And if I refuse? He didn't specify consequences. Pause. He didn't need to. No, he wouldn't. Minister Chao has never needed to specify consequences. The consequences are structural, ambient, already woven into the fabric of what the offer is. Refusal means continued erasure at minimum. At maximum, I think about the agent who did not look at me and the specific efficiency of someone who knew exactly where I was without confirming it with his eyes. He included documentation, Wei Zhan says. Your original appointment records. Campaign dispatches. Cross-referenced against the last 14 days of my operational outputs. I go very still. He's been reading your dispatches. Yes. For how long? Long enough. The implications of this move through me in sequence. Someone inside the compound, or someone with access to the dispatch system, has been routing copies to the capital. The tactical improvements I introduced over 37 days of careful invisible work have been visible to Minister Chao. He knows what I've been doing. He knows what I'm worth to Wei Zhan's campaign. This offer is not about containing me. It is about acquiring me. Or, failing that, removing me from the board entirely. I won't go back, I say. It comes out quieter than I intend. Not uncertain. I have never been uncertain about this. The refusal has been structural since the day the charges were filed. I decided in the trial room that I would not recant what is true to comfort what is powerful, and 3 years of erasure have not changed that, but quiet. The quietness of something that doesn't need to be said loudly because it is simply factually the case. Wei Zhan looks at me. I know, he says. Then what? I told him no. The room is quiet. I look at him. You told Minister Chow no, I say. I told his agent no. I expect the minister will require more direct communication. Something in his voice, not dry exactly, not warm exactly, something in the precise space between that I have not heard from him before. He won't get it. I stand in the war room of a general who just refused a court minister's demand in order to keep a servant he purchased at a slave market, and I feel the ground shift under something I have been standing on for 37 days without acknowledging what it was, and I look at Wei Zhan across the unmapped table and I say, because I have nothing else to say and the silence has a different quality now, a quality that requires something. That will cost you. Yes, he says, simply, without drama, like acknowledging weather. I look at him for a long moment. Why? I ask. He holds my gaze. He doesn't answer. The silence runs longer than any silence between us has run before. Longer than the morning sessions. Longer than the first day at the campaign table when neither of us spoke and the amber light fell across the Eastern Bank flag and the weight of what we were not saying filled the room completely. This silence is different. This silence knows something. I am the one who breaks it. I say, I should go. Not from the compound, I mean from the room, from this particular configuration of things, from the weight of what the silence knows and what I am not yet prepared to let it say. I mean I should pick up my cloth and return to the north shelving and give us both the architecture of normalcy while I reconstruct the internal walls I have apparently allowed to develop structural weaknesses without noticing. I turn toward the door. I take 3 steps. Wei Zhan's hand closes around my wrist. Not hard. Not, it is important to be precise about this. Not restraining, not demanding, not the grip of a man asserting authority over something he owns. It is the grip of a man who reached without thinking, which is the most frightening kind because Wei Zhan does nothing without thinking, and this means something moved faster than his thinking, and I do not know what to do with that information. I stop. I do not turn. His hand is around my wrist and I am facing the door and neither of us moves and the compound outside continues its afternoon in complete indifference to what is happening in this room. His grip loosens. Almost releases. Doesn't. The southern flank, he says, moves at dawn. His voice is completely level. Completely controlled. The operational voice, flat, sequenced, the voice of a man managing a campaign. I need you in the war room. I stand very still. I look at the door. Not forgiveness, I think. Not warmth. The job only. But his hand has not released my wrist. Only the job, I think again. Slowly I turn back. He releases my wrist when I face him. Steps back to the table. Unrolls the southern map. The same map, the corrected crossing, the western tributary now marked in Wei Zhan's own hand in red ink. He positions himself to the right of it, leaving the left side open. The left side. My side. I look at the space he has left. I cross to the table. I look at the map. And I do not think about his hand around my wrist, or the silence that knew something, or the way he said I told him no without any drama whatsoever as though it were the simplest and most obvious thing, as though there were no version of events in which he could have answered differently. I look at the map. I begin to speak. At 5. The southern campaign moves at dawn. I ride with the battalion as a scribe. This is the official designation. I have documents confirming it, a scribe's satchel across my shoulder, ink-stained fingers that are not difficult to maintain because I have been handling documents for 40 days and my fingers were already ink-stained before I arrived here. The designation fools no one who matters. Lieutenant Feng looks at me when the column assembles in the gray pre-dawn and looks away with the specific diplomatic blindness of a young officer who has learned which things he is not supposed to see. Wei Zhan does not look at me at all during assembly. This is also information. He looks at me when we are alone and the war room is empty and the compound is quiet. In public, in the operational space, I am a scribe with a satchel and ink-stained fingers and he is the Empire's Western commander managing 40,000 men and the distance between those two things is an ocean and we both know it and neither of us has said so because saying so would require acknowledging that the distance is something other than simply true. I mount the horse they've assigned me, a steady gray older chosen for reliability over speed, a scribe's horse, and I fall into position with the support column and I watch Wei Zhan ride to the front of the formation without looking back and I think. This is the last controlled thing. Everything after this is the field. War looks different from inside it than it looks on a map. I know this. I have always known this intellectually, have accounted for it in every campaign architecture I have ever designed, built in the margins of uncertainty that the map cannot capture, the noise and the weather and the specific way that human beings under fire stop behaving like units and start behaving like people. I know it. Knowing it and standing inside it are different countries. The river is 3 days' ride from the compound. We make it in 2.5 because Wei Zhan pushes the pace in a way that costs comfort but preserves the element of timing, and timing at a river crossing is the difference between a controlled engagement and a catastrophe. I ride with the support column and I watch the terrain and I compare it to the map I have memorized and I note 4 things the map did not show me. A ridge line to the northeast that provides elevated sight lines, a stand of dense forest on the western bank that could conceal a reserve force, a secondary tributary channel not marked in the intelligence documents that will slow the right flank's approach by approximately 20 minutes, and the particular quality of the river current in the early morning light. Faster than the seasonal depth estimates suggested. I write all 4 observations in my scribe's notebook. I do not deliver them to anyone. We camped the night before the crossing on the eastern bank. The river sounds different at night. Larger. More patient. I sit outside my tent in the dark and listen to it and think about the 20 minutes the right flank is going to lose to the secondary tributary and whether Wei Zhan knows and whether the briefing this evening, which I was not in, which I will not ask about, accounted for it. A shadow settles beside me. Not Wei Zhan. Fong. He sits without invitation in the way that young officers sometimes sit near people they are trying to assess. Not aggressively, not quite casually, in the particular mode of someone gathering information while appearing to be doing nothing. Can't sleep, he says. Listening to the river, I say. He nods. We sit for a moment. The general reviewed the updated formation twice tonight, he says to the river, not to me. Changed the right flank approach 20 minutes before the briefing closed. I look at the water. Did he, I say, cited a secondary tributary not in the original intelligence? Pause. No one mentioned it in the briefing. He had it written in his field notes already. I say nothing. Fong looks at the river. Get some sleep, he says and stands and leaves. I sit in the dark for a while longer. He saw it himself, I think. He didn't need me. And underneath that, quieter, something I do not examine directly. Or he read my notebook. The crossing begins at first light. I watch from the eastern bank with the support column while the advance units move into the water. Organized, controlled, the left flank taking the western tributary approach as planned, depth consistent, the formation holding its shape through the current. The right flank adjusts for the secondary channel. The center holds its position, waiting. It is working. I watch it work with the specific feeling of watching something you designed from the inside. Not pride exactly, not ownership, but the deep professional satisfaction of a structure performing under load the way you calculated it would. The crossing holds. The left flank arrives intact on the western bank, 43 minutes ahead of what the original plan would have delivered. The right flank clears the secondary tributary with 12 minutes to spare. The center begins to move. Then the commander falls. It happens fast and slow simultaneously, the specific temporal distortion of crisis, where each individual moment is very clear and the sequence between moments compresses until you cannot account for the time. A volley from the western tree line. The forest I noted, the concealed reserve force I noted, the thing the intelligence documents did not flag because no one had walked this bank in the current season and seen what the summer growth had done to the sight lines. The center commander goes down. His horse continues without him for 3 strides before anyone reacts. The center falters. Not collapses. Falters, which is the moment before collapse, the moment where the outcome is still a variable. I have seen this moment on maps and in reports and in the reconstruction documents of campaigns that failed and campaigns that recovered, and I know with precise certainty that the variable closes in approximately 90 seconds. After 90 seconds the falter becomes a rout and a rout at a river crossing becomes a massacre. I'm already moving before I have decided to move. This is the thing about 3 years of performing invisibility. When you stop performing it, no one is ready. I push the gray horse through the support column, not aggressively, not with drama, with the flat purposeful momentum of someone who knows exactly where they are going and has already calculated that the people in their way will move, and I reach the nearest officer at the center's right edge and I say 3 words. Not loudly. Precisely. Will. Then hold. He looks at me. He is 28, maybe 30, a decade of field experience in his face, and he is looking at a scribe on a gray horse telling him to wheel his unit and hold position, and he has approximately 4 seconds to decide whether I am someone who knows what they are talking about or whether I am about to get everyone killed. He wheels. He holds. The center doesn't collapse. What happens instead? The wheeled unit creates a lateral barrier that breaks the momentum of the falter, which gives the units behind it time to close and reinforce, which stabilizes the line long enough for the left flank, already across and intact, to redirect and come up on the tree line from the north. The concealed reserve force has approximately 11 minutes before the left flank reaches them. They do not wait 11 minutes. They break cover to retreat at 8 minutes, which means they are in the open when the left flank arrives, which means the engagement is brief and decisive in a direction that favors us completely. The center holds. The western bank is secured by midday. I return my gray horse to the support column and I take my scribe's satchel off my shoulder and I sit on the eastern bank in the thin autumn sunlight and I write nothing in my notebook for a long time. My hands are shaking. This is new. My hands do not shake, have not shaken, through 3 years of trials and markets and rope at my wrists and a general's hand closing around the same wrist in a war room in Lingjun. I look at them with mild clinical interest and I breathe slowly and I wait for the shaking to stop. It takes longer than I expect. The camp is established on the western bank by late afternoon. I am assigned a tent with the support staff. I clean my hands. I change my riding coat for the plain gray one that reads as clerical. I am sitting on my bedroll reviewing, or performing reviewing, a stack of administrative documents when the tent flap opens. Wei Zhan fills the entrance. He is still in field armor, not yet changed, the dust of the crossing on him, a cut along his left jaw that has been cleaned but not dressed. He looks at me across the small space of the tent with an expression I have not seen on him before and cannot immediately classify. He looks, I realize, like a man who has been holding something at careful distance for a long time and has just discovered the distance has closed without his permission. He comes inside. He lets the tent flap fall. He doesn't speak immediately. This is normal for him, the long stillness before the precise statement, no filler, no approach, just the full weight of his attention and then words when he has found the right ones. I have learned the rhythm of this over 40 days of morning sessions. I wait. The camp sounds come through the tent walls, voices, horses, the river still audible beneath everything, patient and indifferent. 3 words, he says finally. I look at him. Will. Then hold. His voice is completely level. 3 words and the center didn't break. The left flank was already across, I say. I just needed to give it time to redirect. You identified the concealed position. The forest coverage was visible in the morning light. The intelligence documents were written in summer, the growth pattern had changed. You knew before the crossing. I noted it. In your notebook. Not a question. I say nothing. Wei Zhan looks at me for a long moment. The cut along his jaw needs dressing. I notice this with the part of my mind that notices everything and files it, and the part that notices it is not the tactical part. I knew what you were from the second week, he says. The tent is very quiet. I know, I say. I kept you anyway. 3 words. Not I wanted to keep you. That is too large, too exposed, too much architecture for a man who communicates and coordinates and field notes. Not I chose you. Too deliberate, implies something he may not be ready to name. Just I kept you anyway. The conjunction doing all the weight. The anyway that contains everything it is set against. The letter, the agent, the minister, the erasure order, the risk of housing an imperial fugitive inside a military compound, the cost he named without drama and absorbed without complaint. I kept you anyway. I sit on the bedroll and I look at him and I feel the internal walls I rebuilt after the war room encounter, the ones I reconstructed carefully, methodically, the ones I was fairly confident were structurally sound, develop, in real time, critical failures at the load-bearing points. That's the confession, I say. Quietly. Not a challenge. Just naming it. Yes, he says. The same way he said I told him no. Simply. Like the simplest and most obvious thing. I stand. The space between us in the tent is not large. 3 steps, maybe 4. I have been calculating distances for 40 days, exits and approach routes and the radius of what is safe and what is not, and I look at this particular distance and I think, this is the last calculation. After this there are no more exits to map. I cross the distance. Wei Zhan is very still when I reach him. The complete stillness he carries always, but charged now, loaded, the stillness of something held at the absolute limit of its containment. Up close, in the dim light of the tent, he is, I have the word this time, the accurate one, the one I did not let myself use in the war room that first afternoon. Overwhelming. Not in size, not in rank, not in the 40,000 men outside this tent who will move where he directs them. In the specificity of his attention. In the way he looks at me like I am the only variable in his field of view, and he has been looking at me this way, I realized, since a slave market in Lingjun where I did not look away. I reach up and press my fingers to the cut along his jaw. He doesn't move. This needs dressing, I say. Yes, he says. His voice has changed. Still level. Something underneath the level has changed. I'll do it, I say. Yes, he says again. Neither of us moves for a moment. Then I reach for the medical kit on the supply shelf and he sits where I indicate, and I clean the cut properly and dress it, and his hands rest on his knees the whole time, very still, and I work close enough to feel the warmth coming off field armor and cedarwood and iron, and underneath that the cold mineral thing like stone after rain. When I finish, I do not step back. He looks up at me from where he sits. The distance between us now is the length of a breath. What follows is not performance. It is not the careful architecture of a man who has been managing impressions for 3 years, not the controlled composure, not the strategic stillness, not any of the things I have refined into structural habit out of survival necessity. It is the thing underneath all of that. Wei Zhan pulls me down by the front of my riding coat, not hard, not demanding, with the same precision he brings to everything, finding the exact grip that is not restraint but is also not a question. And I come without resistance because I stopped mapping exits 20 minutes ago on the eastern bank with shaking hands in thin autumn sunlight, and I have not started again. He kisses me the way he does everything. Without excess, without performance, exactly as much as the moment requires and no more, which turns out to be considerable. I get my hands into his hair. He makes a sound against my mouth that I will spend the rest of my life filing under information I did not expect to need and cannot stop needing. We have 40 days of not saying things between us. What happens in the tent is the saying of all of them, not in words. Wei Zhan does not have those words, and I am not sure I have them either, but in the specific language of two people who have been communicating in margins and misfiled documents and salted fish left outside closed doors and the deliberate space left at the left side of a campaign table. I have spent 3 years being invisible. He looks at me like I am the only thing in his field of view. I let him see all of it, the parts one sealed and the parts one managed and the parts one told myself were not information I needed, and the specific quality of a mind doing what it was built to do when the person it is doing it with is someone who can use what it produces and does not require it to be smaller than it is. He traces the rope marks on my wrists, still faintly visible 40 days later, with the pad of his thumb. What? Slowly. He does not say anything about them. He doesn't need to. After the tent is quiet. The camp outside continues, voices, horses, the distant sound of the river, the watch change at the perimeter. The world does not reorganize itself around what has happened in this tent. It continues in complete indifference, the way it continued through 3 years of everything else. I lie still and listen to Wei Zhan breathe. He is on his back, one arm behind his head, the cut along his jaw dressed cleanly, the field armor folded at the tent's edge with the automatic discipline of a man who does that in his sleep. He is looking at the tent ceiling. I'm looking at the tent ceiling. We are not touching. There is 3 inches of space between us, and the 3 inches is comfortable. Not distance, not the ocean that separates a general from a scribe in public operational space, just the ordinary 3 inches between two people who are where they are supposed to be. After a long time he says, "The hidden tributary. You saw it before the crossing. The morning light," I say. "The map was wrong." "The map was wrong," he agrees. Silence. "You could have told me," he says. Not accusatory. Observational. Filing it. "You already knew," I say. "You changed the right flank approach before the briefing." Pause. "I read your notebook," he says. I close my eyes. "I know," I say. He is quiet for a moment. Then, so quietly I almost miss it under the sound of the river. "Don't stop writing in it." I open my eyes. The tent ceiling is plain canvas, campaign weight, practical. Outside, the western bank is secured. The left flank is intact. 40,000 men are where they are supposed to be. I think about a war room in Lingjun and a campaign table and an Eastern Bank flag placed on the wrong crossing point and a general who removed it without ceremony and set it on the table like a small reckoning with the cost of bad information. I think about 37 mornings arriving at dawn. I think about being told to be here, and what it has cost him and what it has cost me, and the specific quality of a cost that you absorb without complaint because the alternative is not a version of things you are willing to inhabit. "I won't," I say. He nods once. The river runs on outside. The 3 inches between us stays exactly as it is, not closing, not widening, simply present, simply real, the ordinary space of two people who are, for the first time in a very long time, exactly where they are. I do not map any exits. I close my eyes. I sleep. At 6 months is enough time for the world to rearrange itself around a new fact. Not to accept it. The world does not accept new facts, it absorbs them slowly and unevenly, the way riverbanks absorb floodwater, some places yielding immediately, some places holding out long after the pressure has moved on. But 6 months is enough time for the rearrangement to become visible. For the shape of what has changed to emerge from the noise of everything still resisting it. The Western campaign closes in the 43rd day after the river crossing. Wei Zhan's report to the Imperial War Council is 17 pages. I write 12 of them. My name appears nowhere in the document. Wei Zhan's seal is on every page. This is not a compromise or a concealment. It is a structure we build together without discussing it, the way we build most things, in the space between what is said and what is simply understood. The campaign outcomes are, there is no neutral word for it, extraordinary. The Southern Territory is secured 6 weeks ahead of projection. Supply loss is 40% below the campaign average. Engagement casualties on the Western Front are the lowest recorded in 11 years of active conflict in that region. The War Council receives the report and the numbers and sits with them and cannot account for the numbers using the variables it knows about. Minister Chow reads the report. I imagine his face when he reads the numbers. I allow myself this. We return to the Lingjun compound in early winter. The northern hills have snow on them now. The courtyard trees are bare. The war room is exactly as we left it. Maps on 3 walls, campaign table at center, the north shelving where I spent 40 mornings with a cloth performing the elaborate fiction of a man who was not thinking about anything. I stand in the doorway on the first morning back and look at the room. Wei Zhan stops behind me. Problem? He says. No, I say. I go inside. I do not pick up the cloth. The change is gradual and then total, the way most real changes happen. I stop performing clerical invisibility, not dramatically, not through announcement, but through the simple accumulation of days in which I am in the war room when officers arrive for briefings and I am not introduced and I do not leave and eventually the officers stop expecting me to leave. Fong adapts fastest, which I expected. He begins directing questions toward me during briefings with the practiced casualness of a man who decided some time ago to arrange his understanding of the situation around what is actually true rather than what is officially designated. The steward adapts second. She knocks before entering the war room now. She did not knock before. I note this without comment and find, to my mild surprise, that it costs me something. The knocking, the slight formalization of what was simple and functional, the beginning of a new designation layering itself over the old one. I have spent 3 years being aggressively nothing. Being something again is, unexpectedly, uncomfortable in its own way. I tell Wei Zhan this one evening. He looks at me with the flat attention he brings to problems. You were never nothing, he says. I performed nothing. You performed it badly, he says. I knew what you were from the second week. I look at him. You've said that before. It remains true. I look back at the map I am reviewing. After a moment he crosses to the table and stands beside me and looks at the same map and says nothing further, and I think, not for the first time. This is what it is. The specific thing. Not the river crossing or the tent or the 3 inches of space or the confession contained in any way. This, 2 people standing at a table in a war room in winter looking at the same map, the silence between them costing nothing. This. Minister Chow's second communication arrives in the 3rd month. It is not an offer this time. It is a formal petition to the Imperial War Council, filed under the Ministry of Civil Administration's Oversight Authority, requesting an audit of General Wei Zhan's campaign records on grounds of strategic irregularity. The petition does not name me. It does not need to. The audit request is structured to expose the gap between Wei Zhan's declared resources and the campaign outcomes, a gap that can only be explained by an undeclared variable. The undeclared variable is me. I read the petition when Wei Zhan places it on the table in front of me. I read it twice. I set it down. He's not trying to retrieve me anymore, I say. No, Wei Zhan says. He's trying to discredit the campaign outcomes. If the audit finds an unlicensed imperial fugitive embedded in your operational structure, the victories become liabilities, Wei Zhan says. Yes. I look at the petition. This exposes you. Yes. Wei Zhan. He looks at me. I can leave, I say. If I'm not here, there's no audit finding. The outcomes stand on their own. The numbers are real regardless of. No, he says. Just that. Flat, immediate, without deliberation. Not the considered precision of a man who has weighed options, but the response of a man for whom this particular option does not exist and has not existed for some time. I look at him. He looks back. Then what? I say. He picks up the petition. He sets it aside. He unrolls the Eastern Regional map. New campaign, spring projection, a completely different theater, and he positions himself to the right of it and leaves the left side open. We have work, he says. I stand at the left side of the map. I look at it. After a moment I say, the northern approach is vulnerable to spring flooding in the second month. I know, he says. The intelligence on the garrison strength is 3 months old. I know. You're going to need. I know what I'm going to need, he says, and there is something in his voice that is not quite warmth and is not quite amusement and lives in the precise space between them, the same space as everything between us, the space I have stopped trying to map because some territory refuses cartography. I look at the map. Fine, I say. We work. The petition dies in committee 6 weeks later. I do not know the exact mechanism. Wei Zhan does not detail it, and I do not ask because asking would require pretending I don't already know that 40,000 men whose lives were preserved by the Western campaign's outcomes have commanding officers, and those commanding officers have voices in the War Council, and those voices have weight that a civil ministry petition cannot simply overcome when the numbers are what they are. Minister Chow withdraws the petition. He does not communicate again. The silence from the capital has a different quality than the silence of the compound at night. It is watchful, compressed, the silence of something waiting for a better moment. I know this. I file it. I return to the Eastern Regional map and the spring flooding vulnerability, and I do not spend energy on what I cannot currently affect. 3 more months pass. In the 5th month, a letter arrives from the Imperial Palace. Not through unofficial channels. Not sealed without a sender marking. Through the formal Imperial dispatch system, with the Emperor's administrative seal on the outer wrap and a courier in palace livery who waits in the compound's main courtyard for acknowledgement of receipt. Wei Zhan brings it to the war room unopened. He sets it on the table in front of me. I look at it. I look at him. Open it, he says. It's addressed to you. Open it. The Imperial edict is 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph, a formal review of the case record filed in the 3rd year of the Tianlong reign against one Xinyu, formerly of the Imperial Advisory Council. The review has been conducted under the authority of the Office of Records Examination at the War Council's request. The review finds material inconsistency in the original evidentiary record. I read the word inconsistency and I keep my breathing even. The second paragraph, a formal notation that the charges filed in the 3rd year of the Tianlong reign are hereby classified as unsubstantiated pending full record restoration. The notation does not use the word falsified. It does not need to. The third paragraph, a directive from the Imperial Administrative Office, not a request, a directive, for the former Imperial advisor Xinyu to present himself at the capital within 30 days for formal reinstatement proceedings. The fourth paragraph is 3 sentences about ceremony and the restoration of rank insignia and something about the Imperial Court's confidence in its advisory institutions that I read twice and set aside because I am still at the word inconsistency in paragraph 1. Inconsistency. 3 years. A market with hemp rope and 4 exits. A sleeping mat outside a closed door. A campaign table with a space left on the left side. Inconsistency. I set the letter down. I look at the war room, the 3 walls of maps, the north shelving, the particular quality of winter light through the eastern window falling across the campaign table at the angle I have been watching for 6 months. My hands are not shaking. This surprises me. You filed the review request, I say. The War Council filed the review request, Wei Zhan says. At my recommendation. When? 3rd month. I look at him. The 3rd month. When the audit petition was still active. When Minister Chow's second communication was still sitting on the table between us and I was telling him I could leave and he was saying no with the flat immediacy of a man for whom the option does not exist. He was already moving on a different axis. You didn't tell me, I say. No. Why? He looks at me for a moment. Because you would have told me not to, he says. And I would have done it anyway and then we would have had a disagreement and I find disagreements with you expensive. I stare at him. Expensive, I say. You argue well, he says. It takes time. I look at him for a long moment. I look back at the letter. Wei Zhan, I say. Xinyu, he says. My name. My real name. He says it the same way he says coordinates. Precisely, without ornamentation, like it is simply the correct designation for the thing he is referring to and there is no version of events in which a different word would be accurate. I pick up the letter. I fold it. I put it in my coat. We ride to the capital in the 4th week. Wei Zhan rides with me. This is not required. The edict is addressed to me, the reinstatement proceedings are a civil matter, a general's escort is not protocol. He comes anyway with Fang and a small honor guard, and he does not explain this, and I do not ask him to explain it because some things do not require explanation, and both of us have become, over 6 months of morning sessions and Eastern Bank crossings and 3 inches of space in a campaign tent, proficient at knowing which things those are. The capital is the same. This surprises me. I expected it to feel different. The return, the weight of 3 years of absence pressing against the familiar streets and buildings. But the capital does not care about my 3 years. It continues in complete indifference, the way it always has, the way everything always has, enormous and specific and entirely occupied with its own concerns. We stay in the military quarter, Wei Zhan's standing residence in the capital, 3 rooms and a courtyard and a view of the eastern wall that in winter holds snow along its upper edge like a brushstroke. I stand in the courtyard on the first evening and look at the eastern wall. Wei Zhan stands beside me. We do not speak. After a while I say, I don't know what I'm going back to. You're going back to your name, he says. That's not the same as knowing what to do with it. He considers this with the gravity he brings to tactical problems. You'll figure it out, he says. You do that. I look at the wall. That may be the most confidence anyone has expressed in me, I say, using the fewest possible words. I'm efficient, he says. I look at him. He is looking at the wall. After a moment, very quietly, I start laughing. I check because I am precise about my own emotional vocabulary, the first time I have laughed in 3 years. It feels structural, involuntary, something releasing in the load-bearing architecture that I did not know was still under compression. Wei Zhan looks at me. He does not laugh. But something happens in his expression, something small and specific and entirely his, and I file it under a category I have recently created and not yet named. The reinstatement ceremony is held in the Imperial Hall on the 28th day. I am dressed in restored advisory robes, deep blue formal weight, the rank insignia of the Imperial Advisory Council on the collar, everything I was before and everything I spent 3 years performing the absence of. The robes fit. Someone measured correctly. I stand in the antechamber and I look at my own hands and I think, this is the same person who stood on a platform in Lingjun with hemp rope at his wrists cataloging exits. The same person. Nothing about what I am has changed. Only what I am permitted to be called. I straighten the collar. I walk into the hall. The Imperial Hall is large and formal and full of people who signed my erasure order or knew someone who did or benefited in some way from the 3 years during which Xinyu did not officially exist. I know this. I look at no one in particular on my way to the central floor. I keep my face composed, not the blank performed composure of a market platform, not the strategic invisibility of a war room servant. Something else. Something I am still learning the shape of. The ceremony is precise and brief. The Emperor's representative reads the reinstatement edict. My rank is restored. The record correction is entered into the formal register. My name is written back into the document it was removed from in a trial room 4 hours long 3 years ago. I stand on the central floor and I receive this with the composure of a man who has already spent 6 months deciding how he feels about it and arrived at something that is not triumph and is not grief and is closest to, this is correct. This is what was always true. The record has caught up to the truth. The ceremony concludes. The imperial representative gestures for the formal acknowledgement. The assembled officials will signify their recognition of the reinstatement by the standard observance. In the back of the hall, Wei Zhan moves. He is in full general's armor. He did not have to wear it. He is attending as a witness, not in official military capacity. The armor is not required. He wears it anyway, every piece, the formal dress armor of the Empire's Western commander with the campaign seals on the shoulders and the rank insignia that represents 11 years of field command and 40,000 men and a battlefield record that fills more pages than I could draft in a month. He moves through the assembled officials with the same quality he moves through everything, without excess, without performance, the precise unhurried displacement of someone who knows exactly where they are going and has already decided to go there. He reaches the central floor. He stops in front of me. And he kneels. Not the half-observance of a formal proceeding. Not the practiced abbreviated gesture of a man fulfilling a protocol requirement. He kneels completely, one knee then both, the full weight of it, the full armor, in the center of the Imperial Hall in front of every official who signed my erasure order, his head lowered in the observance that is not required of him and is not protocol and is, I hear the hall shift, the specific collective intake of breath that a room makes when it witnesses something that changes the understood order of things. Entirely and unmistakably a choice. The Empire's Western commander. Kneeling to a reinstated advisor. In full view of everyone who decided that advisor did not exist. The hall is completely silent. I look down at Wei Zhan. He looks up at me. His expression is the same as always, flat, controlled, exact. But his eyes have the quality I have been filing under the unnamed category for 6 months, the quality that is not warmth exactly and is not approval exactly and lives in the precise space between, the space that contains everything he does not say and everything he does instead. I keep my face still. I do not let my hands shake. I look at him for a long moment, at the general who purchased me at a slave market for the asking price without negotiating, who left food outside a closed door, who said I told him no without drama and I kept you anyway without poetry and don't stop writing in it in the dark of a campaign tent with the river running outside. And I feel the thing I have been not examining for 6 months arrive at a surface I can no longer pretend is covered. I reach down. I place my hand on his shoulder, the formal response, the acknowledgement, the gesture that completes the observance and tells him he can rise. He rises. He stands beside me. The hall remains silent for 3 more seconds. Then it resumes, the way everything always resumes, in complete indifference to what has just happened in its center. That evening. The military quarter residence, the 3 rooms and the courtyard and the eastern wall holding its brushstroke of snow in the winter dark. The war room Wei Zhan keeps here is smaller than the one in Lingjun. 1 wall of maps, a narrower table, the same quality of lamp that burns low and amber and makes the documents readable without effort. I am at the table. Wei Zhan is reading. 2 cups of tea, mine cooling because I keep forgetting it when I am working, his precise temperature maintained by some discipline I have observed and not understood. My corrections are in the margins of the Eastern Regional projection, not hidden, not framed as misfiled documents or questions posed as confusion. Simply there. Xinyu Imperial Advisor. Margin notes. Corrections. The lamp burns. The eastern wall holds its snow. Outside the capital continues, enormous, indifferent, entirely occupied with itself. I reach for my tea. It is cold. I drink it anyway. Wei Zhan looks up from his document. He looks at my cup. He looks at me. He picks up the teapot and refills my cup without comment and returns to his reading. I look at the full cup. I look at him. He is reading. His expression is the same as always. He will not look up again. This is not a gesture he is waiting to be thanked for. It is not a gesture at all. It is simply, the cup was empty, now it is not, the problem is resolved, moving on. This is the thing. Not the kneel, though the kneel will live in the record, in the official account of the reinstatement ceremony, in the hall full of officials who will spend years calibrating the meaning of what they witnessed. Not the river crossing or the tent or the anyway or any of the large moments that I have catalogued and filed and will carry forward. The teapot. The cup. A man who refills it without looking up and returns to his work like the answer to a question that was never asked aloud. I pick up my brush. I look at the Eastern Regional projection. I write a correction in the margin. The spring flooding vulnerability, the northern approach, something I have been meaning to note for 3 days. My handwriting is neat and precise and no longer hidden. The lamp burns between us. The silence costs nothing. I do not map any exits. Hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.